The sound of 300 people laughing at me was the loudest thing I'd ever heard. But it was the look of pure, cold triumph in my wife Sarah's eyes that truly signaled the end of our 12-year marriage. She stood on that stage, shimmering in a $4,000 sequin dress I had secretly paid for, holding a microphone like a scepter, and dismantled my dignity in front of every major player in the city. Little did she know, the house husband she was mocking was the only reason she even had a job to brag about, and her world was about to collide with a reality she wasn't prepared to survive. Before we dive into how I turned her night of glory into a public execution of her career, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. Your support is what keeps these stories of ultimate justice coming, and you won't want to miss how this one ends. My name is David, and for the last decade, I've been the man in the shadows. To Sarah and her circle of high-flying corporate friends, I was the comfortable husband. I worked from home in a spare bedroom, usually wearing joggers and a hoodie, tinkering away on what Sarah called little spreadsheets. She convinced herself, and eventually everyone we knew, perhaps I was a low-level data analyst with a tiny salary that barely covered our grocery bills. She loved the narrative that she was the sole breadwinner, the powerhouse carrying the weight of our lifestyle, while I played around on a laptop. The truth was far more complex. I am a top-tier strategic consultant and a silent partner in several venture capital firms. I don't just analyze data, I restructure empires. I'm the person CEOs call at 3 in the morning when their stock is plummeting. I make more in a single quarterly bonus than Sarah made in 3 years, but I never felt the need to flaunt it. I liked our quiet life. I liked that she was ambitious. I thought my support was helping her grow. But as Sarah climbed the ladder at Titan Global, a massive logistics firm, her ambition turned into a poisonous arrogance. She started coming home late, smelling of expensive wine and talking down to me like I was a slow-witted child. She began making suggestions on how I should dress, how I should speak, and eventually, she just stopped introducing me to people altogether. I became the invisible man. I watched her ego swell until it blocked out the sun. She had no idea that I was the one who had written the 3-year expansion plan that put her department on the map. She had no idea that I was the one who had vetted her for her upcoming promotion to regional manager during a private dinner with the board of directors. I did it because I loved her. I did it because I wanted her to feel successful. But the woman I loved was being replaced by a monster of vanity. The night of her promotion party was supposed to be the pinnacle of her career. Titan Global had rented out the ballroom of the most expensive hotel in the city. The guest list was a who's who of industry leaders. Sarah had spent weeks preparing, buying a wardrobe that cost a small fortune, all while complaining about how my meager contributions were holding back our savings. I showed up in a simple, well-tailored suit, nothing flashy, intending to play the supportive husband one last time. From the moment I arrived, I was treated like a nuisance. Sarah's colleagues looked through me. Her boss, a man named Miller who thought he was God's gift to logistics, actually asked me to go fetch him a fresh drink, assuming I was part of the catering staff. Sarah saw it happen and didn't correct him. She just smirked and whispered, "Go on, David. At least you'll be useful for something tonight." I felt the first crack in my patience right then. I realized that the woman I had spent 10 years building up was more than happy to tear me down to make herself look taller. I took a seat at a back table, watching as she worked the room, laughing too loudly, flashing her new promotion ring, and acting as if she had built the company with her own 2 hands. Then came the speeches. Miller got up first, praising her vision and relentless drive. Then, Sarah took the stage. She looked radiant, but her eyes were hard. She began by thanking the company, then the board, and then she turned her attention to me. I thought, for a fleeting second, she might say something kind. I thought she might acknowledge the late nights I spent proofreading her presentations or the advice I gave her that saved her biggest account. Instead, she laughed into the microphone. And finally, she said, her voice dripping with mock affection, "I have to thank my husband, David. He's my favorite little domestic pet. While I was out winning contracts and securing our future, he was at home in his pajamas, making sure the Wi-Fi worked. It's not easy being the breadwinner for a man with such humble aspirations, but someone has to pay for the pearls, right?" The room erupted in laughter. It wasn't just a joke, it was a public shaming. People were actually pointing at me. Sarah leaned into the mic again, her smile widening. He's so sweet, really. He once tried to give me business advice on the logistics merger. I almost told him to stick to his little spreadsheets and leave the real work to the grown-ups with the real salaries. I sat there, frozen, as the humiliation washed over me. I looked at the faces of the people I had helped from the shadows, people who were now laughing at my expense because they didn't know who I was. Sarah was basking in it, glowing under the spotlight, convinced she was untouchable. She had no clue that the grown-ups she was referring to were currently texting me, asking for my approval on the next fiscal merger. She had no clue that the woman who actually owned the chair she was sitting in was about to walk through those double doors. I felt a cold, sharp clarity take hold of me. The love I had felt for her didn't just fade. It evaporated, leaving behind a hard, crystalline resolve. I wasn't just going to leave her. I was going to show her exactly what happens when you bite the hand that feeds you. And I was going to do it in front of everyone she was trying so hard to impress. As the applause for her cruel tribute died down, I saw a familiar figure standing at the entrance of the ballroom, and I knew that Sarah's reign was about to come to a very sudden, very permanent end. The laughter in the room didn't just fade. It died a violent death the moment the heavy gold leaf doors at the back of the ballroom swung open. A sudden, heavy silence swept through the 300 guests like a physical wave, starting from the back and crashing toward the stage where Sarah stood, her hand still clutching the microphone, and her face still flushed with the thrill of her own cruelty. I didn't have to turn around to know who had arrived. I could feel the change in the air, the shift from a rowdy, drunken celebration to a room full of people holding their breath in the presence of real, absolute power. Before we get into the moment Sarah's world began to tilt on its axis, please take a second to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and drop a comment below. Your engagement helps us share these stories of poetic justice with the world, and you definitely want to see the look on Sarah's face when she realizes who she's been sleeping next to for 10 years. Walking down the center aisle was Victoria Vance. In the world of global logistics and international finance, Victoria wasn't just a name. She was an institution. She was the primary shareholder of Titan Global and the woman who had personally orchestrated the acquisition of 3 of its largest competitors in the last 18 months. She was 45, elegant in a way that made Sarah's designer dress look like a costume, and she possessed a gaze that could make a seasoned board member start sweating in seconds. The room parted for her like the Red Sea. Miller, Sarah's boss, nearly tripped over his own feet as he scrambled off the stage to greet her. He was smoothing his hair, his face transforming from a smug mask of laughter to a desperate, fawning grin. Sarah was frozen on the stage, her eyes wide. This was her idol. This was the woman she had spent years trying to emulate, whose 5 pillars of leadership she quoted in every meeting. I watched Sarah's hand tremble slightly as she lowered the microphone. She was already calculating how to use this moment, how to pivot from mocking her loser husband to impressing the most powerful woman in the industry. She had no idea that Victoria wasn't here for the party. She was here for me. Victoria didn't even glance at Miller as he stood there with his hand extended, offering a practiced, sycophantic greeting. She walked right past him. She walked past the row of vice presidents who were all standing like soldiers at attention. She walked straight toward the back table where I was sitting, the shame table, where Sarah had relegated me so I wouldn't stain her reputation with my presence. As Victoria approached, the whispers started. Who is she going to? Is that the owner? Wait, is she looking at the husband? I stood up slowly, adjusting my cuffs. I saw Sarah's expression change from awe to utter confusion. She started to walk toward the edge of the stage, her voice high and frantic. Ms. Vance, what an incredible honor. I'm Sarah, the new regional manager. I'm so glad you could make it to my celebration. Please, allow me to escort you to the VIP section. My husband was just leaving. He's a bit overwhelmed by these kinds of events. He's not really a corporate person, if you know what I mean. She let out a nervous, tinkling laugh, trying to re-establish the narrative that I was a social liability. Victoria stopped exactly 3 feet in front of me. She didn't look at the stage. She didn't look at Sarah. She looked at me, and a small, genuine smile touched her lips, a smile she never gave to the press or her employees. You're late with the quarterly projections, David, she said, her voice clear and resonant enough to carry through the silent ballroom. I was expecting them on my desk by 6. I had to come find you myself. The silence in the room somehow got deeper. Sarah's mouth was hanging open now, her eyes darting between me and Victoria like she was watching a tennis match she couldn't understand. Miller looked like he was about to have a heart attack. "David," Sarah stammered, her voice cracking. "Ms. Vance, I think there's a mistake. He's just a data analyst. He works from home. He doesn't even have an office at Titan." Victoria finally turned her head, her gaze landing on Sarah like a cold spotlight. The smile vanished, replaced by an expression of icy, professional detachment. "A data analyst?" Victoria repeated, her tone dripping with a subtle, dangerous irony. "Is that what he told you? Or is that just what you wanted to believe so you could feel superior while he was busy saving this company from the disastrous mistakes of your department?" She turned back to me, her hand reaching out to rest firmly on my forearm, a gesture of intimacy and total public endorsement. "David isn't an analyst, Sarah. He is the principal consultant for Vance Holdings. He owns 10% of the voting shares in the parent company that owns your paycheck. Without his little spreadsheets, as you so eloquently put it, Titan Global wouldn't have survived the winter merger." I saw the moment the blood drained from Sarah's face. It wasn't just embarrassment. It was a total, systemic collapse of her reality. The domestic pet she had just mocked in front of 300 people was, in fact, her boss's boss's boss. She looked at the microphone in her hand as if it were a poisonous snake. The laughter she had solicited from the crowd just minutes ago now felt like a death sentence. She tried to step down from the stage, her legs wobbling. "David, honey, why didn't you tell me? Why would you keep this from me?" She was trying to sound wounded, trying to play the victim, but her eyes were still full of that same calculating greed. "I didn't keep it from you, Sarah," I said, my voice calm and steady. "I tried to talk to you about the logistics merger 3 times last month. You told me to shut up and stick to the Wi-Fi. You were so busy looking down at me that you forgot to look at the name on the non-disclosure agreements you signed when you took this job." I looked around the room, making eye contact with Miller, who was now backed against a wall, looking for an exit. "The truth is, Sarah, I wanted you to succeed on your own. I wanted to see if the woman I married was still in there somewhere. But tonight, you showed me exactly who you are. You didn't just mock me. You mocked every person who works hard without needing a title to feel important." Victoria tightened her grip on my arm. "We have a lot to discuss, David," she said, her voice dropping to a more personal level. "But first, I think we should clarify the new hierarchy in this room. Don't you?" I looked at Sarah, who was now standing on the floor, trembling, trying to push through the crowd to get to me. She was reaching out, her face a mask of desperate, fake affection. But I wasn't looking at her anymore. I was looking at the future, and for the first time in 10 years, Sarah wasn't in it. The silence that followed Victoria's revelation wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, like the air before a massive tectonic shift. I could see the sweat breaking out on Miller's forehead as he realized he had spent the last hour treating a major shareholder like a waiter. But it was Sarah's face that I couldn't stop looking at. The arrogance that had defined her for years was melting away, replaced by a frantic, jagged desperation. She looked like someone who had just realized the bridge she was standing on was made of paper, and the water below was full of sharks. Before we get into the moment Sarah tried to spin her cruelty into affection and the professional price she was about to pay, make sure to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and leave a comment below. Your support is what fuels this journey of absolute karma. Sarah took a shaky step toward me, her hands reaching out, her fingers trembling so much the diamonds on her rings, the ones she'd complained I couldn't afford, seemed to rattle. "David, honey," she started, her voice a high-pitched, fragile whistle. "You have to understand, the speech, the jokes, it was just theater. It was for the brand. I wanted everyone to see how far I've come, but I never meant to hurt you. You know I love you. You know everything I do is for us." She looked around at her colleagues, her eyes pleading for someone to validate her lie. But the very people who had been laughing with her minutes ago were now stepping back, literalizing the distance between them and a woman who was clearly radioactive. I didn't move. I didn't flinch. I just looked at her as if she were a complicated math problem that I had finally solved. "For us, Sarah?" I asked, my voice carrying easily through the silent ballroom. "Was it for us when you spent our anniversary dinner on the phone with Miller, complaining that my presence at the corporate gala would lower the prestige of your department? Was it for us? When you took the bonus, I quietly funneled into your account and spent it on a girl's trip to Cabo, telling me I wasn't cultured enough to enjoy it. Sarah's mouth opened and closed, but no sound came out. She looked at Victoria, then back at me, her brain finally starting to process the sheer scale of her mistake. Victoria stepped forward, her presence so commanding that Miller actually whimpered. She pulled a thin, blue folder from the clutch under her arm. "Since we're all here to celebrate merit and achievement," Victoria said, her voice like velvet wrapped around a razor blade, "I think it's time we look at the actual data behind Sarah's supposed miracle quarter. Miller, you signed off on her promotion based on the restructuring of the Midwestern hub, correct?" Miller nodded vigorously, his double chin flapping. "Yes, Ms. Vance. Her strategy saved us nearly $4 million in overhead." Victoria smiled, a cold, predatory expression. "Actually, Miller, that strategy was submitted to my office 18 months ago by an outside consultant. A consultant who was so modest he didn't want his name on the public filing. That consultant was David." She turned to Sarah, who looked like she was about to vomit. "You didn't restructure anything, Sarah. You found David's old drafts on his home server, put your name on them, and presented them as your own vision. That isn't leadership. That is corporate theft." The gasp from the crowd was audible. This wasn't just a marriage falling apart. This was a professional execution. Sarah's boss, Miller, looked like he wanted to crawl into a hole and die. He had staked his reputation on Sarah's genius, and now he was being told his star employee was nothing but a plagiarist. "Is this true, Sarah?" Miller asked, his voice shaking with a mix of fear and betrayal. Sarah didn't answer. She couldn't. She was staring at me with a look of pure, unadulterated hatred, the mask of loving wife, finally shattered for good. "How could you?" she hissed, the venom returning to her tone now that the lie was dead. "You sat there and watched me work. You let me believe I was winning. You're a monster, David. You set me up." "I didn't set you up, Sarah," I replied, feeling a strange sense of peace. "I gave you every tool to succeed. I gave you the ideas, the support, and the lifestyle. All you had to do was be a decent human being. All you had to do was not step on my neck to get a better view of the ceiling. But you couldn't do that, could you? You were so addicted to the idea of being better than me that you didn't realize I was the one holding the ladder." Victoria reached out and took my hand, interlacing her fingers with mine in a way that was far more than professional. The room noticed. The new hierarchy was being established right then and there. "David and I have been working very closely for a long time," Victoria said, looking directly at Sarah. "He is moving into a full executive role at Vance Holdings starting Monday. He'll be overseeing all regional promotions, including the one you thought you were getting tonight." Sarah looked at our joined hands, and I saw her world finally go dark. She realized that she wasn't just losing her job. She was being replaced in every sense of the word by a woman who actually understood my value. "David, please," she whispered, a last, pathetic attempt at manipulation. "We've been together for 10 years. You can't just throw that away because of one speech." I reached into my pocket and pulled out an envelope I'd been carrying all night. It wasn't a birthday card. It was a formal petition for divorce, already signed and notarized. I didn't hand it to her. I simply placed it on the edge of the stage. 10 years is a long time to realize you've been sleeping next to a stranger, Sarah. I'm not throwing it away. I'm finally taking out the trash. I turned to Victoria, who was looking at me with a pride that Sarah had never shown me in a decade. "I think we're done here, Victoria. The air in this room is getting a bit stagnant." As we turned to walk away, Miller rushed forward, trying to save his own skin. "Ms. Vance, David, please, we can rectify this. We can launch an internal investigation. Sarah, you're suspended indefinitely." But Victoria didn't even stop. She just kept walking, her heels clicking rhythmically on the marble floor. I didn't look back at Sarah. I didn't need to. I knew she was standing there, in her $4,000 dress, surrounded by 300 people who were already deleting her number from their phones. She had wanted to be the star of the night, and she was, but the play was a tragedy, and the curtain had just fallen on her entire life. But as we reached the exit, Victoria squeezed my hand and whispered something that made my heart skip a beat, reminding me that the true promotion of the night wasn't about a job at all. The silence of the ballroom followed us out into the marble-floored lobby, but the echoes of Sarah's screaming were still vibrating in my ears. As Victoria and I walked toward the valet, I felt a strange sensation, not of triumph, but of profound relief. It was the feeling of a heavy, invisible weight finally being lifted off my chest. 10 years of being diminished, 10 years of being this silent partner in my own marriage had ended in a single, devastating hour. But the night wasn't over yet. Sarah wasn't the type to go down without a fight, even when she was staring into the abyss of her own making. Before we get to the final, crushing blow that sealed her fate and the beginning of my new life, please take a moment to subscribe to the channel, hit that like button, and share your thoughts in the comments. We love hearing your take on these stories of poetic justice. We were almost at the glass doors when I heard the frantic, uneven clicking of heels on the marble behind us. "David, stop. You can't just leave me like this." Sarah's voice was ragged, stripped of all its corporate polish. She rounded the corner, her expensive dress torn at the hem where she must have tripped, her mascara running in dark streaks down her face. She looked like a ghost of the woman who had stood on that stage mocking me. She lunged for my arm, but one of Victoria's security detail, a man who had been shadowing us discreetly, stepped in her way with the immovable grace of a mountain. "Get out of my way," she hissed at the guard, then turned her tear-filled eyes back to me. "David, please. Miller just told me I'm being escorted out of the building. He said there's going to be a forensic audit of my entire department. They're going to take everything, David. My reputation, my car, my bonus. I'll be blacklisted from the entire industry." She was hyperventilating now, the reality of her professional suicide finally sinking in. "You have to tell them it was a mistake. Tell them you gave me those files. Tell them we're a team." I looked at her, and for the first time, I didn't see the woman I loved. I didn't even see an enemy. I just saw a stranger who had mistaken my kindness for weakness. "We were never a team, Sarah," I said, my voice as cold and clear as the night air outside. "A team doesn't humiliate its members for sport. A team doesn't steal work and call it vision. You didn't just lose your job tonight, Sarah. You lost the only person who actually believed you were capable of being more than a title." Victoria stepped forward, her hand slipping into mine, the warmth of her touch a stark contrast to the icy atmosphere. She looked at Sarah with a pity that was more insulting than anger. "It's much worse than a blacklist, Sarah," Victoria said calmly. "Vance Holdings has already filed a preliminary injunction. We'll be seeking full restitution for the salary and bonuses you earned under fraudulent pretenses. By the time my lawyers are done, the tiny salary you mocked David for will look like a fortune compared to what you'll have left." Sarah's knees finally gave out. She sank onto the marble floor, a heap of green silk and shattered ego. "Why?" she sobbed. "Why her? Why Victoria?" Victoria didn't hesitate. She leaned down slightly, making sure Sarah heard every word. "Because unlike you, I don't need a man to be less so I can be more. David didn't just save my company. He challenged me to be better. And that's why, when the divorce is finalized, he won't be looking for a regional manager to replace you. He'll be standing next to me as my husband." The fiancé comment hadn't just been a tactical move in the ballroom. It was a promise. I looked at Victoria, and she winked, a small, private moment of shared victory. We turned and walked through the glass doors, leaving Sarah alone on the floor of the hotel she had tried so hard to conquer. The valet brought around Victoria's black Aston Martin, and as we pulled away into the neon glow of the city, I saw Sarah in the rearview mirror, standing under the marquee, being handed a cardboard box of her personal belongings by 2 security guards. It was the most honest moment of her career. The weeks that followed were a whirlwind. The divorce was settled in record time. Sarah didn't have the resources to fight, and with the evidence of her corporate fraud hanging over her head, she signed whatever my lawyers put in front of her. She lost the house, the cars, and every friend she thought she had. Last I heard, she was working a low-level sales job in another state, living in a studio apartment that truly was a dump. As for me, I stepped out of the shadows for good. Working alongside Victoria, I realized that I didn't have to hide my light to make someone else feel bright. We recently announced our official engagement to the board, and the irony wasn't lost on anyone. The man who was too boring for a regional manager ended up being the perfect match for the woman who owns the world. I still wear my hoodies and joggers when I'm working on my little spreadsheets at home, but now, when I look up, I see a woman who knows exactly what those numbers are worth. Author's thoughts. This story is a masterclass in the dangers of climbing the ladder by stepping on the people who are holding it steady for you. Sarah's downfall wasn't caused by David's success, but by her own need to diminish him to inflate herself. In the corporate world, and in marriage, arrogance is a blindfold. Sarah was so convinced of her own narrative that she stopped looking at the facts right in front of her. David's transformation from the invisible man to a powerhouse demonstrates that true value doesn't need to shout to be heard. It eventually speaks for itself through results and integrity. It's a satisfying reminder that the person you're looking down on today might just be the one deciding your future tomorrow. If you loved seeing Sarah get exactly what she deserved, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and hit that like button. We want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a Sarah in your professional or personal life? How did you handle it? Drop a comment below and let's discuss. Your support helps us grow and keep bringing you these incredible stories of karma.